all the things the Cleveland Browns have done this offseason and draft. But it all comes down to one thing, the same thing, the forever thing, the quarterback, Deshaun Watson. Your latest Locked On Browns starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Jeff Lloyd, we are joined by the OBR's Pete Smith, and I appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd, you guys are fantastic. Join in, subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It's always free wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. You see the rundown. We're going to get into a bunch of things. Like I said, Pete Smith is here. Dust is starting to settle. Browns have a mini camp this weekend. Guys in town. So obviously some more news to come in the week. We'll hear from Coach. Happy birthday, Kevin Stefanski. Get player interviews, things of that sort. But Pete, it's just it's the simplicity of the NFL. I mean, and it's not QB is everything. It's not QB wins. But most of the time, your team and your success is indicative of just how well your quarterback does or does not play. The Browns, it's okay for those who question the play. Look, I mean, whatever your thoughts are on Deshaun off the field, that is what it is. That's never going to change. There are some of us who felt he was probably more than holding his own last year. You guys know where I stand on that. But now the Browns going into third year of this investment. And look, they've done everything they could roster-wise last year. They've certainly done everything mostly that they can do for the roster this year to this point. It's going to come down to, hopefully, A, that he is 100% healthy, and B, that the Browns finally see the return of what they thought, the cost was to invest in a player of this caliber.
Yeah, so the first thing is just that he's ready to go for training camp. I think that's everybody's goal. Maybe there's a world where he's ready to go for mini camp, but I don't think it's probably worth it for them. I think it's all going to be on first day of training camp. And then beyond that, it's just playing. He's got to be on the field. When he, the last game of his season was the Ravens game, the second half of that Ravens game, he stopped forcing things and just took what was open and went 14-14, and they crushed it. And I think there's an element of between being hurt and the contract that I think in some ways was Deshaun Watson's always trying to make a $230 million throw as opposed to just taking what's there. And I think the more he plays, the easier that will get, as opposed to feeling like I got to make it all worth it right at once. So it may not be like gangbusters right out the first week, though I think it should be a lot better than it has been, just with comfort and everything else, just getting back into it. But I think it's going to be something that over the course of the year builds up. But that all depends on him just being healthy. If he stays healthy, I think he will be fine. If they stay competitive, which they should, then he should be getting to his best when they need him the most.
And the Browns now with 4 quarterbacks on the roster, of course, with Deshaun, Jamus, Mr. Pro Bowler Hundley, and of course DTR. Pete, this is one because you look at a lot of the depth of the Browns roster currently and the way it is constructed. The Browns, the 3 quarterback thing is something that they love to do, but this would be maybe a talking point now, probably more than ever, is if you maybe just wanted to practice squad that third quarterback, just due to the fact that you're a lot deeper in a lot of positional rooms than than you have been in the past, and you obviously want to keep as much top talent as possible. But it does seem weird to have 4. I mean, we know exactly what they do and how they're going to do the summer plan, but it's kind of hard to see where this is all going to come to surface. Obviously, come final cut downs and then getting to what is a 53 and then what is getting to a practice squad.
Well, I think Tyler Huntley just saw the Browns as a great opportunity to get better at being a quarterback, which we've seen over the past couple of years. Guys are signing here and they're coming out better for it.
Josh Dobbs.
Josh Dobbs. Those are all good examples. So that's certainly a valuable reputation to have, that Cleveland is seen as a place where you get better at quarterback. I think that's why Jamus Winston signed here. I think that's why Tyler Huntley signed here. But for the moment, without Watson practicing and with DTR's hip still, I don't know where he is in his recovery from that. They've got 2 quarterbacks to rep right now. So it's Jamus and Huntley. So Huntley can get a lot of work, get a lot of coaching theoretically. And then ultimately he knows he's not, short of an injury, he's not going to end up here. But to me, I think he looked at this as an internship of sorts where he just gets to get better at quarterback. He gets released potentially. He may end up back in the practice squad. And if he doesn't, he could end up somewhere else and hopefully is better for it. But there was no real demand for his services. He signs a contract with like no guaranteed money on it for practically nothing. And he just gets it's for the coaching in so many ways. So I completely understand why he would do that. And they've got to get these other guys healthy. But in the meantime, they need guys who can hand out, do reps, throw balls to receivers and all that stuff. So it makes sense for all parties involved for the time being.
And the other question I do have here is as far as the quarterback position, with Jameis here, and it looks obviously fully 100% that he's entrenched at the number 2, healthy, not yet, maybe soon, but it puts DTR in a weird spot because here was a guy, and granted, the Browns probably had to put him on more on an accelerated path last year than they wanted to. But, then you look at the fact that he was a day 3 pick, how high were the expectations? So it's going to be, that weird spot for DTR once he is back and healthy. Essentially, the best, even if he plays great, the best he can probably do is end up being quarterback 3 on this roster.
Yeah, I think the hip injury just was a huge deal. I mean, it was more serious than anyone let on. It was so strange when it happened. It was, he hobbles off the field and you're like, all right, he's hurt. And then out for season, hip, nothing else mentioned for months, literally nothing. And there was the possibility that it was going to be worse than they thought. Like that it's going to make him a question for this season at all. It has fortunately responded and is healing to where they get it to. So the Browns aren't messing around with this. Jamus Winston is a more than capable backup quarterback. I think people underestimate just how much Kevin Stefanski had to do with Joe Flacco's success. Certainly Joe Flacco deserves a ton of credit. But if you just look at how quarterbacks have come here and played better from Baker Mayfield, Jacoby Brissett, so on and so forth, that he can do the same thing with Winston. Like that boost is there. But I think DTR just gets to develop and work on his craft. And what I was hoping last year was he would have that great preseason. And we never heard from him again all year. And unfortunately that didn't happen. He did play well in a few spots. So I still, so long as he's healthy, I still like where he's headed. But Jameis is a 1-year deal. So they get through this. If DTR keeps growing, he's going to, and some of that is literal. He needs to get a little bit thicker, that he can cruise into that number 2 spot and they feel like they've locked it down. I think that's part of the reason the Browns are doing this the way they are with these 1-year contracts, whether it was Flacco last year. Obviously, I know that was a different situation. But Jameis this year, I think they are still trying to give DTR a runway to get where he needs to get to be the full-time backup and potentially more down the road.
I mean, it's just good business. You have to protect it. Obviously you have your starting quarterback injured, a guy who potential to be your number 2, most likely number 3 injured. Jameis comes in and, obviously there's a track record there. And, for him to come in as a number 2, obviously is a very, very appealing option. We're going to continue to roll on here. 3 of the best moves. 3 of some of the best moves that Andrew Berry had last season happened after the NFL draft. We're going to see if there's something he can pull off here in the next couple of weeks, maybe before training camp. Your latest Locked On Browns rolls on. Appreciate it, Berry, for being along for the ride. It's winner take all in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. I am Jeff Lloyd, your host, and I appreciate you all for making the show your first listen every single day. Join the Locked On Brown Everyday crowd by subscribing to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It's always free wherever you get your podcasts. Pete, post-draft last year, Zadarius Smith, obviously a trade with the Minnesota Vikings. Safety Rodney McLeod brought in. Then a little later in the summer, Shelby Harris brought in. All three of those players will be here as well for 2024. You look at the tight end room, certainly there's some questions there. But Pete, he made some hay after the draft last year, and three players that turned out to be pretty solid acquisitions for this team. The heater's always on. You're always looking, you're always working, you're always tinkering. What's out there that maybe Andrew Berry can pull off, another late offseason scoop for himself and his team?
Well, depending on how rookie minicamp goes, and we'll see what we'll get a sense of their impression of Trayton Welch, the undrafted free agent from Wyoming. That's the position that stands out where if there's an opportunity to get a veteran tight end, Logan Thomas is sitting out there. I don't know if he really wants to leave the DC since lives there, played college near there, all that stuff, and he's going to be 33 years old. But he is 6'6", 250, does the things that you need if you want another inline guy who has some production at that position. Beyond that, you could see potentially a guy the Browns aren't going to keep, trade for a guy the Browns another team is not going to keep type move, or the Browns use one of their many, many late round picks to acquire another player that could help them at a spot like that. Running back is unlikely, but possible, I suppose, in that vein. Maybe there's another position where they could seek a little bit more help. Offensive line, maybe. That, again, unlikely. The Browns just don't have that much to do, really. It really comes down to a few positions. I mean, when you just look at it from the roster standpoint, your biggest questions beyond Watson are like, what's the running game going to look like? Because we don't know what the schedule is for Nick Chubb. And then it's like, well, the backup tight end situation is not very good. Like these are the problems you want to have when we're sitting there going, I don't know what they're going to do about backup tight end compared to the rest of the division that has a whole lot of real questions to answer.
It's still, for me, and it's still bewildering to look at that tight end position and think that it was just not something they chose to address. And who knows how hard they tried or if there were guys on the board, and unfortunately it just did not work out for them. But after David Njoku becoming such a factor last season and finally, reaching what everybody thought, which look, that it was high potential for what you thought David Njoku could be. Last year, statistically, he hit those parameters. But you look at it now and it's like, God forbid one thing. And, even if David were to miss a game or two, it comes from David Njoku, a really, really good tight end, to, your tight end room after that is, it's bad. Simply put, it's bad.
Well, I mean, the way it's set up, if David Njoku is hurt, they're just not going to use a tight end. They'll go 4 wide or whatever. I mean, Jordan Akins has a role. He can be an F-style tight end, do some wing stuff, all that. But like ultimately, if push comes to shove, chances are your top 4 receivers your fourth receiver at that point is better than your second tight end, which is the whole reason why you could see them make a move or not. They may be comfortable with this. Like, to me, I went to the draft and there were 4 guys I liked. Brock Bowers was one of them, so you weren't going to get him. The Browns and a whole lot of other teams didn't like Jadavian Sanders as much as I thought they would. Jaheim Bell, I don't know what the deal with him is, but barely drafted at all. And then
they basically passed 4 times on him. So yeah.
And then Ben Sinnott went second round. Like
he actually went the pick. He went 53.
Yeah. So after that, to me, yes, I understand there's some super athletic guys like the Theo Johnsons of the world, and you can go, oh, you can talk yourself to the high-end athletic traits can have potential. To me, after those 4 guys, the talent flattened out significantly. And Trayton Welch is not much worse than the guys they would have drafted. So you got him after the draft. We saw the Browns do this last year. We saw them do this with Ronnie Hickman. Ronnie Hickman, to me, even coming out of that draft, 1, I thought he was going to get drafted. And then 2, I looked at the safeties that were drafted on most of day 3, and I thought his talent was comparable. So if you can make that calculation, if you could figure that out, and go, hey, we can get a guy after the draft we feel almost as comfortable as we do with most of the guys we would draft. Just don't draft it. Bring him in, and if they, if he's good enough, you earn a spot on the roster. The Browns have done this. They did this with Hickman. They got Mahmoud Diabate doing that. Like, I think that should be part of their draft strategy. And I've written about this, to like, if you have a good sense of where the talent is at a certain position, you can sort of engineer it where undrafted free agents are looking at you going, this is a great situation for me, which is exactly what happened last year.
Pete, now you've been doing these extensive deep dives on every one of the players the Browns have selected. And if you guys haven't seen any of that, check it out over the OBR. Pete's doing some fantastic stuff with that. It's a long process. A lot goes into it, but great content when it does get published. Anybody pique your interest maybe a little bit more than when the selection was originally made?
That's a good question. I mean, Zinter does. I hated the pick initially because I had nothing to go off of. I want data. I want to be able to look at stuff.
For anybody who's not sure, look, it's always about, it's about three things. It's about tape. It's basically about age, measurements, all that good stuff. And then it's about athleticism. When a guy's got a broken leg and can't do anything in the combine, that leaves a gaping hole, which makes it difficult to put a full, thought as far as whether or not you were in or out on said prospect. But go ahead.
So, like, in a lot of ways, like, Zinter wasn't in the draft process for as far as we know. Obviously, he did interviews. Obviously, he did the medical checks and all that stuff. But like, when you don't get to do any of the stuff, like, it's almost like you disappear. So I think he will be fine. I think he does a lot of things that fit where the Browns are going. I still don't love the Watson pick. I get it. Because they have a clear role for him to be basically Sione Takitaki. So there's a lot of things you can sort of overlook with him. Because if he fulfills that role, you're going to be happy with it. So I think the pick that I like the most, and I even thought that this was going to be the case when he was drafted, was Jamari Thrash. He had a really average athletic profile, and there are a lot of things that you sort of look at and you're like, yeah, I don't know. But like, between sort of the PFF data that's on him that they continue to tease out, even though they don't really make publicly available, how fast he plays, like game speed wise, the tape, and then just the production. Like, I feel really good about where they got him. I don't think he's wide receiver 23 in this draft. I think he can be better than that. I think he fits what the Browns want to do. With the talk about, they keep dropping choice routes into conversations. Clearly, this is something they're going to do. Jamari Thrash is very intelligent in terms of how he understands reading defenses and sort of where the holes in the zone are, how to sort of manipulate man coverage and those things. You see a lot of things where his ability to create separation can be really valuable in that. So I feel better about him than initially, but ultimately, even when I wasn't super sure about him, I still like the fact that they took a premium position. If you're going to take swings on that spot, those things, the money spots that you have a difficult time getting in free agency. So like, Thrash is the guy I feel better about. I'm very curious to see what he can do, because he, similar to Tillman last year, both older relative to what the Browns normally draft, being about 23, they look like, Tillman looked like he could come in and do things, even though he's still got work to do on the mental side. He did. I mean, he looks like an NFL wide receiver. Whatever anyone wants to say about him, he physically looks like a dude. He catches the ball like a real receiver. He's got NFL strength, all those things. So like, I'm optimistic about him. Jamari Thrash does things that, work on an NFL field. He plays outside. He can play inside. He gets open. He catches the ball, and he's really good after the catch. I think the thing that really stands about Thrash is his ability to transition from pass catcher to run after catch. He is so quick from going from catching a simple stick route or a hitch to turning around and making a guy miss, that you sort of get very intrigued about what he can do. Because if he's on the field, he's your fourth or fifth option. Guys, forget about him or whatever, because they got to deal with Cooper. They got to deal with the Judys of the world. They got to deal with Njoku and the guy everybody hates, who I still really like, Elijah Moore, who's like going to be a problem for defenses with everybody they've got. Like, then Jamari Thrash can sort of just be like, hey, I'm sitting here open. He could have a nice little nice little year, but the possibility, the same thing that works for him could work against him in the fact that he could be everything the Browns hope he is and be wide receiver 5.
Very, very true. The thing I like about Thresh is I do agree with the route running. There's a curl route, or maybe even a hitch. And, just with sinking his hips, I mean, he ends up with a 5-yard cushion on the defensive back. The other thing is with the ball in his hands, straight to daylight. And there's, there's no looking at juke. There's no looking around. And you see it on a jet sweep that he scored on. There's another one. He's lined up in a slot and basically, short, skinny post slant. And he just goes, and it's straight to daylight. It's right to the pylon, runs 100 million miles an hour. So look, he's in a tough spot, obviously, because there's a crowded room in front of him, but the potential certainly is there. And you like the fact that he found a way to do it between 2 levels. And obviously Georgia State proved himself there and then jumped up 1 level and certainly did it there at Louisville as well. We're going to continue. We're going to talk about what team in the AFC North Pete thought maybe did some pretty good damage in the AFC North as far as the draft is concerned. We'll continue on. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You've already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there is so much more to get. You can get cool new playing pieces to travel boards with. You can get hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Jeff Lloyd, joined by the OBR's Pete Smith, your latest Locked On Browns. Appreciate you all who make Locked On Browns your first listen. The everyday crowd, join them. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Shows always available, always free, wherever you get your podcast. Pete, obviously for the Browns, it was a small draft. Other teams in the AFC North, not the case. Who of the 3, Pete, do you look at and say, you know what, they came away with a pretty decent haul?
I mean, I like what the Pittsburgh Steelers did. I just don't like. I think Zach Frazier is prototypical center. I like what Fatnute can do. I'm curious to see if he can really hold up a tackle, but at worst, he should be a good guard. I totally understand the Mason McCormick pick as a depth guy, even though he's older. I still hate the Peyton Wilson pick. I still hate it because, look, I understand everything they're going to say. Oh, he's super fast, he's physical and all this. And they're right. But to me, the 3rd round is for 2 contract players, and I'm not sure he's going to make it through 1 with his knee and just penchant for injury anyway. But those 3 linemen are enough. And I'm not a huge fan of Roman Wilson either, but maybe that works in their offense. Slot only guy that didn't do a whole lot in terms of route variation. Though the one thing I do like for them as a fit is that Roman Wilson was really good on extending plays. Like once the play broke down, he did a really good job of finding space, getting himself open, and putting himself in a position where the quarterback could find him. And given what the Steelers have done with the quarterback position, that seems like a viable threat. Now, having said all that, you're going to have likely 2 rookies and a second-year guy starting on their offensive line. That is risky in itself. Could be very good, but should have its share of growing pains. And I think the Steelers' defense is very good. But I have no confidence at this point, even with Freiermuth and George Pickens. But once you get after that, Van Jefferson, Roman Wilson, and Quez Watkins are your guys. Maybe Darnell Washington has a bigger role. But people are trying to talk up Calvin Austin III. That's not where you want to be. So it's 3rd and 10. To me, 3rd and 10 for the Steelers right now is punt or field goal because I just don't have any confidence that they're going to be able to convert. Any of those situations. I think they have to be able to stay on schedule with Arthur Smith's run game. Obviously, that's what they want to do, play action to take shots down the field. But if they get behind the sticks, I think they're in a world of hurt. I like the Steelers draft, but to me, it feels like a draft for 2025 rather than for 2024. And given their situation at quarterback, that would suggest that might be true too. Maybe they catch lightning in a bottle, although Justin Fields, they declined his option, which is confirmed every reason why I thought the Browns had no interest in him. That you were going to trade assets for a guy that you were then going to potentially be losing after 1 year made no sense to me. But unless that happens, then I think they are potentially going to have this really strong offensive line, be in position to then go get who they hope is the quarterback of the future, and continue to add weapons around them at that point. Like, I think they could be a really good situation for 2025, but I don't know what that does for them in 2024 relative to the playoff race. I still think they are a 4th place team, but who knows?
The thing with Fountain now is, with everything you would have said, whether or not he's a center, whether or not he's a guard or a tackle, to go to the AFC North, you're basically going to get a chance to find out right away. Basically, your measuring stick is, can you block Myles Garrett? And look, obviously very difficult, but as far as the arm length, as far as the size, not prototypical, this, that, and the other thing, and you get Myles Garrett twice a year. So the decision should be made rather quickly whether or not Troy Fontenot was going to be able to handle a left tackle spot for the Steelers. But look, still a really good player. There's nothing wrong with being a damn good guard. Obviously, Joel Bitonio, same type of story. There's nothing wrong with it. But certainly, and it's not easy to just go find people who can hopefully, handle Myles Garrett. Certainly. Pete Smith, the OBR. Make sure you check out, obviously, the comprehensive deep guide Pete has done on all the draft prospects. Really, really good stuff. Look, everybody, does their diligence on these players. Then obviously, once you start to have to cover them, you go even further into detail. So make sure you check out that series. Pete's done a great job with that. Make sure you're following @_Pete Smith _. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd. As always, we appreciate you guys for your daily support, watching the show every day. The everyday crowd, you're a bunch of filthy animals, but you're my filthy animals. Join the filthy animals. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go Browns.